Hi, I'm 16F, and I've been holding on to this for a while because I genuinely don't know if I'm overreacting or not. My parents, who are in their late 30s, are the kind of people who think they're still in their 20s. They love to party, go out with friends, and enjoy life, which I get. Everyone deserves a break. But the problem is, their break usually means dumping my two younger siblings, aged 7 and 4, on me. It started small. A few hours here and there while they went to dinner or saw a movie. I didn't mind at first, they're my siblings, and I love them. But over the past year, it's gotten completely out of hand. Now, they'll go out multiple nights a week, leaving me to handle dinner, homework, bedtime routines, and everything else. And it's not like they ask me, they just expect it. The last straw happened last Saturday. My parents announced at 5 p.m. that they were heading to a friend's housewarming party. No prior warning, no asking if I was free. I had plans with my best friend to study for finals, and I told them as much. They brushed it off, saying, "It's just one night, you'll survive." When they came home at 3 a.m., 3 in the morning, I was still awake because my 4-year-old sister had a nightmare and wouldn't stop crying. I was furious but bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause drama while everyone was tired. The next morning, I finally snapped. I told my parents that I was done being their free babysitter and that if they wanted to go out so often, they needed to hire someone. My mom looked shocked and said, "But you're family. It's your responsibility to help out." My dad chimed in, saying I was being ungrateful because they pay for my clothes, food, and extracurriculars. Now, here's where I might be the asshole. I told them that paying for basic necessities doesn't give them the right to treat me like an unpaid nanny. I said I deserve time for myself and my studies and that I'm not a parent, it's their job to take care of their kids. My mom got really quiet, and my dad said, "Fine, if that's how you feel, we'll figure something out." Since then, things have been tense. They've barely spoken to me unless it's necessary, and I overheard my mom telling my aunt that I was selfish and too young to understand the sacrifices of parenting. My aunt called me later and told me I should apologize because my parents just need a break sometimes. Now, I'm second-guessing everything. Am I being selfish? Should I have just sucked it up and kept helping out? Or was I right to stand my ground? After that argument, I decided to stick to my guns, but things got even worse. My parents started pulling the classic passive-aggressive moves. For example, when my dad came home with groceries, he loudly muttered, "Guess we need to start teaching the kids how to cook since someone can handle their responsibilities." My mom chimed in, saying, "Not everyone understands what it means to sacrifice for family." It felt like every single comment was a jab aimed at me, and honestly, it was exhausting. A couple of days later, they went out again without saying anything. I thought maybe they'd finally hired a babysitter, but no, my siblings just wandered into my room around 8 p.m. asking when dinner was. Apparently, my parents assumed I'd just take care of it even after our argument. I ended up making them some pasta because I didn't want them to go hungry, but I left the mess in the kitchen for my parents to deal with. When they got home around midnight, they didn't say a word to me, but my mom banged pots and pans around the kitchen the next morning, clearly annoyed. Then came the big blow-up. My mom sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "We need to have a serious conversation about your attitude." She started going on about how hard it is to be a parent, how they both work full-time, and how I don't appreciate everything they do for me. She said it's not too much to ask for me to help out with the kids since they're giving me a roof over my head. I told her that I do help out, a lot. I help with laundry, dishes, cleaning, and watching the kids more than any 16-year-old I know. I said it's not fair to dump everything on me just because they want to relive their youth. That's when she lost it. She said I was out of line and that I didn't know what real stress was because I didn't have a job or bills to pay. At that point, I was shaking, but I held my ground. I told her I understand that parenting is hard, but it's not my job to raise my siblings. I said I deserve to have my own life and focus on school without constantly being called on to parent two kids that aren't mine. Her response? "If that's how you feel, maybe we should rethink how much freedom you have." I didn't even know what she meant by that, but it sounded like some kind of weird threat. I told her, "You can't ground me just because I said no to babysitting. That's insane." She stormed off, leaving me sitting there feeling completely drained. The tension in the house was unbearable after that conversation. My mom barely spoke to me unless it was to ask, or rather, demand, that I do something for the family. My dad just kept giving me these disappointed looks, like I'd betrayed them somehow. But the kicker was when my mom told me she and my dad were going to have a family meeting that evening. I could already tell it wasn't going to go well. At dinner, my parents sat me down at the table with my siblings present. My younger brother and sister had no idea what was going on, so they just sat there quietly, eating their food. My mom started by saying something like, "We've been reflecting on the recent events, and we feel like this family needs to get back on the same page." I stayed quiet because I knew this wasn't going to be a two-sided discussion. My dad chimed in and said, "We all have to pull our weight, and right now, it feels like you're not doing that." That's when I snapped. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I said, "I'm the only one who's been pulling their weight. You expect me to cook, clean, babysit, and still manage school and my own life while you two just do whatever you want. How is that fair?" My mom looked like she was about to explode. She said, "We're your parents. Everything we do is for you and this family, and you have the audacity to act like we're the problem?" I responded, "Yes. Because you're treating me like a live-in nanny, not your child." My voice cracked at the end because I was so angry and frustrated. My dad told me to watch my tone, which only made me angrier. "Why is it okay for you to disrespect me by dumping all your responsibilities on me, but I can't even speak up without being told to calm down?" My little siblings started crying at this point, which made me feel awful. I wasn't trying to upset them, but I was at my breaking point. My mom told me to leave the table if I was going to act like this, so I did. I went straight to my room, slammed the door, and cried into my pillow for what felt like hours. The next day, my parents didn't speak to me at all. It was like I'd been put into some kind of silent punishment. But what really set me off was when I overheard my mom on the phone with my aunt. She was talking loudly enough that it was clear she wanted me to hear. She said something like, "I don't know where we went wrong with her. She's so selfish and ungrateful." That hurt more than anything else. I'd always tried to be a good daughter, and hearing her talk about me like that made me question everything. Was I really selfish? Was I the problem? I started spiraling, wondering if I'd been too harsh or if I should have just sucked it up for the sake of peace. But then something happened that made me realize I wasn't crazy. My aunt, the one my mom had been complaining to, called me later that evening. She told me she'd heard both sides of the story, and while she understood my parents were stressed, she thought it was unfair for them to put so much on me. She even offered to talk to my mom on my behalf, but I told her not to bother, it would probably just make things worse. After the call with my aunt, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was nice to hear someone finally validate my feelings, but it also reinforced just how little support I had in my own home. My parents seemed so set in their belief that I was the problem, and I honestly didn't know if anything would ever change. A few days later, things escalated even more. My mom announced at breakfast that they were planning another night out, this time, a fancy dinner with some of their friends. Without even looking up from her coffee, she casually said, "You'll be watching your siblings again tonight." I froze. My siblings looked at me nervously, probably sensing that I wasn't going to just go along with it this time. I took a deep breath and said, "Actually, I'm not available tonight. I have plans." The room went silent. My mom finally looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone icy. "I have plans," I repeated firmly. "You can either find someone else to babysit or stay home." My dad chimed in, his voice stern. "What plans could you possibly have that are more important than helping your family?" "Plans for my own life," I shot back. "You two get to go out and enjoy yourselves whenever you want, but I'm expected to give up all my free time. It's not fair." My mom slammed her coffee mug down on the table. "We're your parents. We've sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us? By being selfish?" I stood up, my hands trembling with anger. "I'm not being selfish. I'm setting boundaries. You can't just keep taking advantage of me and expect me to be okay with it." At that point, my mom started yelling about how ungrateful I was, and my dad told me to stop acting like a brat. My siblings were clearly uncomfortable, their eyes darting back and forth like they didn't know whose side to take. I felt a pang of guilt for putting them in the middle of all this, but I knew I couldn't back down. That evening, my parents left without saying another word to me. They didn't even try to ask if I'd changed my mind, they just assumed I'd cave and watch my siblings like always. But I didn't. Instead, I called my aunt and asked if she could come over and help. She showed up within an hour, bringing snacks and games for my siblings to keep them entertained. When my parents came home later that night, they were furious to find my aunt there. My mom started yelling about how I'd embarrassed them by dragging someone else into her family business. My aunt, bless her heart, wasn't having any of it. She calmly told my parents that they were being unfair and that I had every right to set boundaries. My dad tried to argue, saying it was just babysitting, but my aunt cut him off. It's not just babysitting when it's constant. She's your daughter, not your nanny. After that heated confrontation, the atmosphere at home was tense for weeks. My parents barely spoke to me unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then, their tone was cold and clipped. I felt like I was walking on eggshells constantly. My siblings, on the other hand, seemed confused. They'd quietly ask me things like, "Are you mad at mom and dad?" Or "Why don't you want to hang out with us anymore?" That broke my heart because it wasn't about them, it was about my parents' lack of respect for my time and boundaries. The turning point came one evening when my mom called a family meeting. I'll admit, my heart sank as I walked into the living room and saw my parents sitting there, arms crossed, looking like they were ready for battle. My siblings were there too, sitting awkwardly on the couch. My mom started off by saying, "We've been thinking about what happened, and we're trying to understand your point of view." I blinked, caught off guard. Was this an attempt at a truce? My dad quickly added, "But we also think you've been incredibly disrespectful. This family works because everyone contributes, and it feels like you're trying to opt out of your responsibilities." There it was. The classic guilt trip. I could feel my frustration bubbling up again, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm not trying to opt out," I said carefully. "I've always helped out when I could. But you've been treating me like a live-in nanny, and it's not fair. I need time for myself too." My mom sighed, clearly exasperated. "We're your parents. We've done so much for you, raising you, providing for you. Don't you think you owe us a little help in return?" That hit a nerve. "I do help," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "But this isn't just a little help. It's constant. Every time you want to go out, I'm the one who has to step up. When do I get to have a life?" My dad leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "You make it sound like we're abandoning you with your siblings. We're just trying to have some time to ourselves. Don't you think we deserve that?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not saying you can't have time to yourselves. But why does that time always come at my expense? I have school, a part-time job, and my own life to manage. You act like it's selfish for me to want some balance." My mom rubbed her temples, clearly frustrated. "You're making this so much bigger than it needs to be. When we were your age, we helped out at home all the time. It's just what families do. You're being dramatic." That was the last straw. Dramatic? Seriously? You've been dumping all the responsibility of parenting onto me, and when I finally stand up for myself, I'm dramatic. I stood up, shaking my head. "This isn't about helping out. It's about you taking advantage of me and calling it family responsibility." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. My siblings were looking down at their laps, and I felt a pang of guilt for bringing this tension into their lives. But I knew I couldn't back down. Finally, my dad broke the silence. "All right. If that's how you feel, then we need to figure out another solution." My mom shot him a sharp look, but he ignored it. "Maybe it's not fair to rely on you as much as we have been. We'll start looking for a sitter to help out." For a moment, I was stunned. Had I actually gotten through to them? But then my mom interjected. "We'll look for a sitter, sure. But don't think this means you're completely off the hook. You're still part of this family, and you're still expected to pitch in." I sighed. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was progress. "Fine," I said. "I'm okay with helping out sometimes. But it has to be reasonable. I need time for myself too." After that conversation, things started to change, slowly, but surely. My parents did hire a sitter, though they still asked me to help out occasionally. It wasn't perfect, but at least I didn't feel like the weight of the entire household was on my shoulders anymore. Even though there was some progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents still didn't fully understand my point of view. The sitter they hired was only part-time, and there were still plenty of days when they'd call me last minute to step in because something came up. At first, I was accommodating. I wanted to believe they were trying to meet me halfway. But the more it happened, the more it started to feel like old habits creeping back. For example, one Friday night, I had plans to hang out with my friends, something I rarely got to do because of how busy I'd been. Just as I was about to leave, my mom stopped me in the hallway. "Hey, can you watch the kids tonight? The sitter canceled, and we already made reservations," she said, not even waiting for my response before heading toward the door. "Mom, I told you I have plans tonight," I said, my voice tight with frustration. She paused and turned around, clearly annoyed. "It's just one night, okay? You can see your friends anytime." "No, Mom. I can't just see my friends anytime. You've made sure of that, I shot back, and this time, I didn't budge. You're treating me like a safety net again, and it's not fair. My dad came over, clearly overhearing the conversation. What's the big deal? You're already here. It's not like we're asking for a lot. That was the moment I realized they hadn't truly learned anything. They still saw my time as expendable, as something they could use whenever it was convenient for them. Actually, it is a big deal, I said firmly. You hired a sitter because I told you I couldn't keep doing this. If the sitter cancels, that's your responsibility to figure out, not mine. I'm not the backup plan. The room went silent for a moment, and I could feel the tension thicken the air. My mom's face hardened. Fine, she said curtly. We'll figure it out. And they did. But the vibe in the house shifted after that. My parents were colder toward me, not outright hostile, but there was this undercurrent of resentment. They didn't say it, but I could tell they thought I was selfish, that I was making life harder for them. For a while, I started questioning myself. Was I being unreasonable? Was I really just making things more difficult for everyone? But every time I started to feel guilty, I reminded myself of all the sacrifices I had made over the years, the canceled plans, the sleepless nights, the constant stress. I wasn't being selfish. I was setting boundaries. One day, my little brother came up to me while I was studying. He looked hesitant, but eventually, he said, I heard Mom and Dad talking about you. They think you don't love us anymore because you don't want to babysit. Hearing that broke my heart. That's not true, I told him gently. I love you guys so much. But sometimes, even people who love each other need to set boundaries. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. It just means I need to take care of myself too. He seemed to understand, but I couldn't help feeling angry that my parents would put those kinds of ideas in his head. It was manipulative, even if they didn't realize it. After that conversation with my little brother, I realized I had to be crystal clear about my boundaries, not just with my parents, but with myself. I wasn't going to let guilt or manipulation change my mind. When my parents tried to pull me back into the old patterns, I stuck to my guns. I reminded them of the sitter, suggested alternative solutions, and, when they tried to guilt-trip me, I calmly but firmly shut it down. I love this family, but I'm not going to sacrifice my own life to make things easier for you, I told them during yet another tense conversation. It wasn't easy. They still made comments about how family helps family or how back in their day, kids respected their parents more. But the more I stood my ground, the more they seemed to adapt. They even started using the sitter more regularly and stopped asking me to cancel my plans last minute. I could tell they weren't happy about the changes, but I didn't need them to be happy about it, I just needed them to respect it. The real turning point came a few weeks later when my mom, out of nowhere, apologized. I didn't realize how much we were putting on you, she admitted. We've been so focused on what we needed that we didn't think about how it was affecting you. That small acknowledgement meant the world to me. It didn't erase all the frustration, but it felt like progress. Now, things are much better. My parents still have their moments, but they're learning to respect my time and my life. And as for me, I've learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you strong. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to babysit my siblings 24/7? Also, please subscribe to this channel for future updates.